Earlier this year, I went to Antarctica because I was feeling restless. I wanted to do something for the world, and I wanted to see the world. So when the opportunity came to experience climate change firsthand with an organization called Students on Ice, I jumped at it. We were about 100 explorers in total, students, scientists, artists, and leaders, and we converged at the bottom of the world in the city of Ushuaia, Argentina, which is the southernmost city in the planet. And I remember one day, as we were touring the city, a bit of graffiti caught my eye. It said, "Welcome to Ushuaia, the end of the world and the beginning of everything." And it's a phrase that has stuck with me ever since. From Ushuaia, we boarded a ship, sailed for 2 days, and finally crossed into Antarctic waters on January 1st, 2012. On our first day in Antarctica, the island we visited was completely shrouded in fog, so we couldn't make a landing, but we did get off the ship into these rubber motorboats called Zodiacs to cruise around and explore. And this island had this massive, towering glacier between two summits. It was towering over the water, and the lady who was driving my Zodiac, Sonia, she was a biologist, she took us within about 100 meters of this glacier. And she told us that 10 years earlier, when she'd first visited this island doing research, the glacier had extended out over the water up to the point where our boat was now bobbing up and down. So in the 10 years since she'd last come here, the glacier had receded about 100 meters. I don't know quite what I expected going to Antarctica, but it was a jarring way to begin our trip. Over the next few days, we explored islands, saw penguins, hiked up mountains, did research, and slid down ice caps on our bellies head first. We each understood Antarctica in the way that felt most right to us, whether that was through science or art or history or anything else. Our time there completely liberated my senses. I swear I saw colors in the sky and in the ice that I have never seen before. I heard the thunder of icebergs calving into the water, and I smelled the stench of penguin guano from far away. On our last day in Antarctica, I was seriously regretting all the time I had spent sleeping there, and so I woke up at 5 a.m. with my friend Serena to stand out at the bridge of our ship and watch as we sailed into a place called Whalers Bay, which used to be the hub of the whaling industry at its height in the last century. And at Whalers Bay, as we were walking around, all I could think of was back to the night before, when we stood out on deck watching two humpback whales breach in and out of the water in the primal ballet that is a humpback whale feeding frenzy. They had jaws that were 8 feet wide, completely massive, diving in and out of the water, scooping tons and tons of krill into their mouths. They were the most beautiful and powerful creatures I had ever seen. So when we were walking around these machines that were once used to crush whales and store their oil, I couldn't wrap my head or my heart around the logic of it. Later that day, we found ourselves inside this massive rusted metal tank that was once used to store whale oil. And inside it, two of my friends from Northern Canada, Pam and Becky, took each other's arms and began throat singing. And their voices came from deep inside them. It was the purest sound I had ever heard come from human beings. And their voices were magnified by the metal of the drum so that it sounded like they had thousands more members of their communities there singing with them. And in my head, I was thinking of how I knew that their communities depended on animals like whale and seal and caribou. But the whales who had found their end there at Whalers Bay, they weren't hunted for the life or nourishment they might bring to a person, but just for the money. They were purely commodities. And Pam and Becky sang for a long time before they finally broke apart and collapsed into laughter. But that day I felt an intense connection with all the people who suffer from the consequences of climate change so acutely and so personally. That was our last day in Antarctica, and I know it will stay with me forever. So the plan coming home was that I would tell my friends and family what I had experienced. I would share my story with my community, and I would figure out whatever I had to do to save Antarctica. It didn't happen quite like that. Coming home was tough. Part of it was the stress of having to worry about things like exams and homework and all the little bits of daily life that we got to take a break from in Antarctica. Part of it was the crushing feeling of sitting in my classroom sure that I was the only one thinking about Antarctica and that in those moments I wasn't doing a single thing to save it. Mostly though, it was this feeling of hopelessness. this feeling of hopelessness that our lifestyles, my lifestyle, was slowly destroying this place that I had fallen in love with over and over in the past few weeks. And it was paralyzing to feel like nothing I could ever do would make a difference in the grand scheme of things. And I don't think I'm alone in feeling that hopelessness. It's the same hopelessness that typically dominates environmentalism. And I'm scared that that hopelessness is what's holding us youth back from giving all that we can to making a better and more peaceful future. We live in a society that tells us the more we have, the richer we are, the happier we will be. The more we pull from the earth, the happier we will be. And environmentalists tell us that if we pull a little less in this tug of war with the earth, if we use less, drive less, take shorter showers, if we can relieve the collective pressure of humanity has on the earth, then we can avert this crisis. But when I hear this, it makes me feel guilty and greedy and selfish and just plain bad. I mean, if the goal of the environmental movement is to stop people from acting in their own interests, then man, we've got a hard fight to fight. And that feeling right there, that's what creates the debilitating hopelessness that stops us from making any sort of change whatsoever. So what if we frame this differently? What if, rather than a tug of war that was impossible to win, we thought of our relationship with the earth as a web? And here's my highly scientific diagram showing you how when we pull a string in this web, the tug is felt far on the other side. It's a Jenga tower of factors like the atmosphere and oceans and animals and sunlight and plants and us. When we take from the earth, it takes back from us. That is ultimately the source of so many of the environmental conflicts we are experiencing right now. When we give to the earth, its gifts of a healthy and thriving environment circle back to us. And it's in our interest to care for the earth because we aren't separate from it, we are part of it. When I was in Antarctica, I didn't see climate change, I felt it. I met Becky, whose family and whose community depends on hunting animals like whale and seals for the nutrients to survive in their environment. This is Mike. He told me how his family has never seen so much exposed rock in the winter times as they have in the last few years, and the lack of snow has made it so difficult to travel and hunt. Climate change and so many of the conflicts that our world is facing right now aren't isolated to any one part of the world. In Antarctica, I found myself standing at the feet of some of the most majestic sights I had ever seen. Glaciers and ice caps and mountains, and at my feet, a glacier was melting. All at once, I felt like the most insignificant particle in the universe and the most powerful person in the world. Because while all these conflicts affect every single one of us has the power to change them, and we already do. What's so unique and so powerful about our generation is that we have the tools and the resources to rewrite history at our fingertips. When you are as much a shaper of the world we live in today as the other 7 billion people out there, your voice, your unique link in the spiderweb network of the cosmos can't get lost. Your every choice matters. Your every action matters. You matter. Our expedition leader in Antarctica, Jeff Green, used to tell us that climate change is just one of many symptoms of an unhealthy planet. It feels like there is crisis after crisis being piled on our shoulders. No wonder we feel hopeless. No wonder we think of the end of the world. But I think all these conflicts stem from this misguided idea that we are separate. We are so busy becoming independent that we've forgotten we are interdependent. And I think we need to remember this interconnectedness that humans have known inside themselves for thousands of years now. I've been to the end of the world. I've seen it. I went there expecting it to be cold and dead and harsh, and it was cold. But the end of the world is the most beautiful place I have ever seen, and it is thriving with life. I wouldn't trade being alive today for any other point in human history because we are at a turning point. All these conflicts we hear about, from political unrest spurring revolutions to inequality and the Occupy movement to conflict in Central Africa and Coney 2012, from the smallest conflicts in your individual lives to the most daunting ones that we all face together. All of these conflicts aren't the end of the world. They are only the beginning of everything. Thank you.